Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Professor Dr. Januarius Mucianto M.Hum as the first examiner, the Honorable Professor Dr. Rudi Hartono MPD as the second examiner, and also the Honorable Professor Dr. Isi Yuliasri as the final project advisor and the third examiner. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this final project under the title Manipulation in Indonesian Translation of Twain's The Adventure of Tom Sawyer. My name is Habibah Rahma Ningtyas, an English education student of Universitas Negeri Semarang, and this is my presentation. First of all, I would like to deliver the content of this presentation. This presentation consists of 5 chapters. The first chapter is introduction, and then the second chapter contains literature review, and chapter 3 delivers the research methodology, and chapter 4 as the main topic of the presentation will present the finding and also the discussion. The last is chapter 5 that concludes the presentation and also gives suggestions. Proceed to the first chapter. The first chapter consists of background of the study, research objective, and also the limitation of the study. Chapter 1, background of the study. Translation holds a prominent role in knowledge development. The demand of translated books has increased significantly, and literature becomes the most common translated books found in the offline and also online bookstores. Translated literature comes in the form of novels, comics, poems, and etc. And they are published from a different era with the various genres and also styles. People are usually introduced to foreign literature by reading translated novels or watching movies adapted from them. And those movies may increase people's interest in reading the translated novels. As a result, it leads many publishers to extend the genres and also periods of publication of the novels. By translating books from multi-era, it often brings new or even contrast ideologies and also culture with the social beliefs in Indonesia as the target language. Therefore, translators may encounter many obstacles in the process of translation. The work of translation itself is beyond the fact that it is a straightforward work in translating one language into other language. According to Basnet 2013, translation also involves a complex negotiation between both languages. Moreover, Hartono 2014 stated the problems occurred in the translating novel come from various aspects, such as linguistics, cultural, and also literature. Interculture become one of the issues in the translation process due to the differences between source language and also the target language culture. According to Bahasa 2013, translation requires to be aware to the dominant norms operating in both contexts before taking any necessary decision to ensure that the translation could be accepted in the target language. The translator must be competent in both culture because it might cause misunderstanding or misinterpreting if the translator do not have any background knowledge about the culture of the target or the culture of the source language. To strengthen the fact, Ducati 2007 within her study argues that the work of translation is not only a bridge between two languages and also culture, but it is a powerful weapon that could disrupt understanding between culture if it is mishandled. Therefore, there are plenty of studies conducted in the translation field. Until there is an interviewing claims written by Theo Hermans, it is saying that from the point of view of the target literature, all translation implies a degree of manipulation of the source text for a certain purposes. His statements then becomes known as the manipulation hypothesis. The idea that translation may contain manipulation then drove translation scholars to start investigating this phenomena. Therefore, based on the background of the study, the researcher was interested in conducting a study to find out the occurrence of manipulation in English Indonesian translation of The Adventure of Tom Sawyer that was written by Mark Twain. Chapter 1, Research Objective. This present study was conducted for 3 objectives. The first objective is that this present study aims to analyze the type of manipulation occurred in the Indonesian translation of Mark Twain's The Adventure of Tom Sawyer. The second objective is to calculate the frequency of occurrence of different types of manipulation. And the third purpose of this study is to identify the most frequent type of manipulation occurred within this novel. The researcher met limitation in conducting the study. The focus of the study is to analyze the occurrence of manipulation in translated novel, which were classified using the text internal manipulation arranged by Ducati 2007. Several data that were found within this study were considered unconfirmed because the researcher did not have access to conduct an interview with the translator regarding the reason behind the shifting made, particularly in manipulation types which present distortion. Thus, the researcher merely analyzed the data based on recent facts and also previous studies that have been done by the other researchers. This present study analyzed the first 18 chapters out of 36 chapters within the source text and also the translated text. Proceeding to the second chapter of this presentation, which contained literature review. In conducting this present study, the researcher referred to 35 previous studies that had been done by other researchers. There are three previous studies that the researcher used as the comparison. The first study was conducted by Klimovich 2015. Her study attempted to prove the manipulated translation in the literary text employed during communist era. Her study examined the manipulation in translation of the intertextual elements extracted from the Bible. A result was obtained that the text performed direct evidence of conscious manipulation. The translators avoided using intertextual elements from the Bible by applying omission and also substitution of a word and phrase with their analog is not related to the Holy Scripture. And the researcher also found out that those translators gave negative connotation to several linguistic elements from the Bible. The second study was conducted by Shima and Shiva Farahman 2015. The study has proposed to analyze the main occurrence of the translational manipulation performed in the Persian translated novel entitled The Sound and the Fury, written by William Faulkner. The researchers applied comparative analysis to examine two periods of the Persian translation, which were published in 1353 and 1393. The manipulation typology proposed by Zauberger 2004 was adopted as the frame of work. They concluded that the most frequent translational manipulation shown up was substitution. The third study was done by Farahani 2016. The object of the study was a parallel English-Persian translation from a French drama entitled Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. The study intended to figure out the occurrence of manipulation in the translation process and the most frequent one. However, the study only focused on Ducati's 2017 typology, which is manipulation as distortion. The result of this study came up that substitution became the most frequent strategy used by the translator. Theories that are used within this study. Many scholars have defined translation in some ways. The definition of translation came from Verity and Larson, 1986. They defined that translation as a transferring activity of the meaning of the source language into the target language by reconstructing the language without changing its meaning. Larson further stated that in order to preserve the contained meaning in the process of translation, translators should understand about lexicon, grammatical structure, communication situation, and cultural context both in source language and also in the target language. Manipulation in translation has been a topic of discussion in the translation studies for over decades. Several scholars and practitioners have studied and written about this phenomenon. Ducati 2007, within her study, drew a definition that manipulation is the translator's handling of a text which results in adaptation considering cultural, ideological, linguistic, and literary differences between the cultures in context. From the ideas above, manipulation in translation is considered as the handling of text, leading into the adaptation of the text for the target audiences. And refer to the previous hypothesis by Theo Hermann, that all translation implies a degree of manipulation for certain purposes. The researcher attempted to incorporate translation techniques proposed by Molina and Albrecht 2002. The translation techniques employed within this study were merely taken from 13 out of 18 translation techniques, because some techniques are only practiced to meet the literal equivalence from the source text to the target language. The translation techniques which are considered to have chance in practicing manipulation are: first, adaptation, amplification, compensation, description, discursive creation, generalization, linguistic amplification, linguistic compression, modulation, particularization, reduction, transposition, and variation. The diagram shown on the screen is the Ducate's 2007 manipulation typology. As we can see from the diagram, Ducati on her study arranged typology which is divided into two major divisions. They are text external manipulation and also text internal manipulation, in which further each of them were classified into three types based on the purpose of the manipulation, which are handling, improvement, and distortion. Further, each of three types of manipulation then is distinguished into two kinds based on the process of translation, which are conscious and unconscious. The diagram presented on the screen shows the summary of typology arranged by Ducati 2007 in her study. Since the type of manipulation can be derived from translation techniques proposed by several theorists, the researcher attempted to make an adaptation diagram by incorporating the translation techniques into Ducati typology of text internal manipulation. Here is the adaptation of the Ducati's typology that was arranged by the researcher. The definition of each type of manipulation and also the translation technique are provided in the final project report, page 28. The theoretical framework of this present study is presented through the following diagram. This present study focused on analyzing the types of translational manipulation found within the English-Indonesian novel entitled The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, and the novel was translated into Bahasa Indonesia by Zulkarnain Ishak. The researcher analyzed and classified the types of manipulation based on Ducati's text internal manipulation, in which each of the occurrence of manipulation can be in the form of distortion, handling, and improvement. The data analyses are covered from word, phrases, clauses, sentences, and also paragraph that were extracted from both novels. The result of the study discusses the occurrence of transactional manipulation and which type of them is the most frequent one. Next to the third chapter of this presentation, which is research methodology. The present study belongs to descriptive qualitative study since the researcher used technique of seeking, collecting, classifying, and analyzing the data without giving hypotheses based on the data taken from the novel. The findings of the study are presented in words to describe conclusion. The researcher only reported the phenomena happened after gathering some inquiries facts and made the description of the situation or event occurred within the study. In collecting the data, the researcher used three steps of data collection. First, the researcher read both of the novels written in English and also in Indonesia for 3 times. And while reading the novels, the researcher marked any word, phrases, clauses, sentences, and also paragraph which represent manipulation within the corpus of the study. Then, the researcher set the data into the table to proceed the data analysis. After collecting the data, the researcher analyzed and classified the collected data by using several procedures. First, observation. After reading the English and Indonesian version of the novel, an observation was done to find out whether there were sufficient data for the present study. The observation resulted that the novel contained sufficient data in the form of words, clauses, phrases, sentences, and also paragraphs, which indicated as text internal manipulation in the translation. Second, analysis. The researcher put the data that practiced text internal manipulation into a table and then analyzed the type of manipulation for each identified data. The researcher also analyzed the techniques of translation that is employed by the translator. After the data had been analyzed and classified, the researcher calculated the frequency of each type of text internal manipulation in order to find out the most frequent one occurred in the Indonesian translation of the novel. The researcher used following formula to calculate the percentage. Lastly, the researcher put the result of the analysis into a table after counting the frequency of each type of text internal manipulation. This tabulating aims to make easier in identifying the most frequent type of manipulation occurred along with the technique employed. We proceed to the chapter 4, which is the main topic of this presentation. Chapter 4 is finding and discussion. The finding of the study presented the occurrence of text internal manipulation mentioned in Ducati study 2007. There are 7,087 data that documented the occurrence of text internal manipulation in the process of translating the text into target language. The data were extracted from 18 chapters of the novels in form of words, phrases, clauses, sentences, and also paragraphs. The results showed that all of the type of text internal manipulation are identified within this analysis. Based on the table and the diagram on the screen, it can be concluded that the most frequent types of text internal manipulation occurred is the conscious handling, which happens 424 times and holds the percentage up to 53.9%. The following slides will be presenting a brief findings of each type of text internal manipulation. First is the finding of conscious handling. According to Ducate's study, conscious handling happens as inevitable changes due to linguistic and/or cultural consideration. This is because culture-specific phenomenon may create difficulties for the translators. There are 10 translation techniques that can derive conscious handling. They include adaptation, compensation, discursive creation, generalization, linguistic compression, modulation, particularization, reduction, transposition, and also variation. In 424 analyzed data considered as conscious handling, the most frequent translation techniques employed by the translator is reduction, in which it occurs 137 data shown. The second type is unconscious handling. It happens in a manifestation as errors, usually due to the carelessness with no serious consequences and where it is obvious and unintentional. There are merely 3 occurrences of the unconscious handling within the study. Datum 326 shows the example of unconscious handling in the form of errors. Next is conscious improvement. It is a type of translation manipulation in which the translator put more elements that make the text become more clear and more comprehensible and acceptable to the target audience. In 207 analyzed data that were indicated as conscious improvement, the most frequent translation technique is explicitation, which occurred 78 times. Next is unconscious improvement. It is presented as a type of manipulation which can be explained with regard to Tauril law's outgrowing standardization that may be manifested through normalization. Baker defined normalization as the translation tendency to stick to the typical linguistic pattern of the target language, even to the point of exaggeration. The following is one of the samples manifesting normalization in the translation, which is taken from datum 328. Conscious distortion is a type of manipulation occurring due to the dominant ideology in which the translator attempts to change the message of the text. The shifting can be also affected to the religion consideration in the target language. There are 92 data that were considered as conscious distortion. The data occur in 9 different translation techniques. As we can see from the table, the most frequent technique that shown conscious distortion is substitution. Lastly, unconscious distortion. It appears as the manipulation due to the translation lack of professionalism, and it is manifested as errors, which seriously mislead the reader and distort the original text. In the present study, there is merely one datum found that is considered as unconscious distortion, or an error made by the translator. The datum 111 shows unconscious distortion, in which the dialogue itself actually comes from a verse from the Bible, and the translation in the novel doesn't refer to the real Indonesian Bible for the mentioned verse. So there is a different phrase that is used by the translator in translating the verse from the Bible. This error was manifested due to the translator's lack of professionalism. Incorporating Molina and Albir 2002 translation techniques showed the result of manipulation in the translation. This fact concludes that several indirect translation techniques employed by the translator have the chances to generate translational manipulation. The translator's ideology, culture, and background knowledge can cause him making several shifting in order to suit the readers in the target language, in order to suit the reader's culture, comprehension, and also other factors in the target language culture. Through this study, the researcher proved Ducate's hypothesis that any shifting made by translator can be considered as manipulation. We come to the end of the chapter, which is chapter 5. It consists of conclusion and also suggestions. Based on the study that has been done by the researcher comes to the conclusion which also answer the research problems. The 6 types of text internal manipulation were found within the study. The data were extracted from 18 chapters out of 36 chapters within the book, and the researcher discovered 787 data taken from the corpus of the study. The type of text internal manipulation that is mainly illustrated in the study is conscious handling. Conscious handling done by the translator often indicated the adoption of Molina and Alpir translation techniques reduction. The suggestions given within this present study include the theoretical suggestion, practical suggestion, and pedagogical suggestion. Theoretically, manipulation in translation is inevitable in the translation process from the source language to the target language, since both languages bring their own culture. Moreover, in accordance with the Ducat's definition of manipulation in translation, it is the realization of the translation handling of text which result in the adaptation considering the cultural, ideological, linguistic, and also literary differences between both of the culture in context. Therefore, translators should have sufficient knowledge about the differences between cultures in the source language and also the target language, so that the translation could be accepted by the target audiences without changing the meaning provided in the source language. Practically, for the next research, in particular the manipulation in Indonesian translation, could incorporate more various translation techniques to find out whether other technique could lead manipulation or not. Moreover, the researcher can also arrange an interview with the translator of the book in order to ensure the reason behind the several manipulation made. At last, it is a pedagogical suggestion. Manipulation in translation can also be used for the teachers or lecturers in translation studies to introduce the language culture between English and Indonesia and what aspect that may lead manipulation in the process of translating text. This can enhance the student knowledge and also awareness of the culture and language gap between English and Indonesian. We come to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.